A veteran died with no family, but 1,000 strangers came. This wasn't just a funeral. It was the first move in a silent 30-year war. They carried more than his casket. They carried a vow for a forgotten family and a warning for the powerful man who thought he'd gotten away with murder. If you're new here, subscribe and comment your location. Now let's begin. The first bike arrived at the lonely little house 3 days after the old soldier died. It was just one bike, a big Harley with a quiet man named David on it. He had ridden from 3 states over. He knocked on the door. A neighbor, a kind woman named Lucy who had checked on the veteran, Mr. Paul, for years, opened it. She looked at the big, bearded man and felt a flicker of fear. "Can I help you?" she asked. David took off his sunglasses. His eyes were old and tired, not mean. "I heard about Paul," he said, his voice gravelly. "I'm an old friend, came to pay my respects." Lucy relaxed a little. "The funeral home is handling things. There's no family. I wasn't sure what to do." "That's why I'm here," David said. He looked past her into the neat, sparse living room. "May I come in? There's something I need to see." Inside, the house was quiet. It was clean, but it felt empty, like a museum of a single life. David walked straight to the mantel. There was only one picture on it, a young Paul in uniform, smiling with a beautiful woman who had her arm around 2 small children. David picked it up, his thick fingers gentle. He closed his eyes for a second. "He never talked about them, did he?" David asked Lucy. "No," she whispered. "He said they were gone. I thought illness or an accident." "It was no accident," David said, putting the picture back exactly as it was. "It was a hit. A man named Victor Rojas ordered it. Paul was supposed to be home. He was. They killed his wife, Elena, and his kids, Jessica and Mark, instead. The case went cold. Paul, he went silent for 30 years. Lucy put a hand over her mouth. "Oh my God." "He was one of us once," David said. "Not a biker, not really, but he saved my brother's life overseas. That makes him family, and our family has a long memory." He took out a small, heavy pouch from his cut. It was made of rough cloth. He opened it and poured a little dark, rich earth into his palm. "From my land," he said. Then he walked to the back door, opened it, and sprinkled the dirt onto the small, well-kept vegetable garden Paul had tended. "To watch over him until we all get here." That was the start. The next day, 10 bikes came. The day after that, 50. They didn't roar into town. They just arrived, quietly filling up the 2 small motels and camping in the fields nearby. They were all kinds of people. Big, scary-looking men like James, who ran a garage in Texas. Women like Mercy and Rita, who rode their own bikes and had hard eyes that had seen too much. Older guys, younger guys, mechanics, lawyers, a doctor from Seattle. They all had 2 things, a small pouch of dirt and a story about Paul. Lucy became the unofficial greeter. She brought out coffee and sandwiches, her fear completely gone, replaced by a swelling awe. She asked James, the Texas mechanic, how he knew Paul. "Desert storm," James said, his voice a low rumble. "My truck broke down in a real bad spot. Sniper Alley, Paul and his squad rolled up. They didn't have to stop. They did. He fixed that truck with chewing gum and a prayer under fire, got us out." He shook his pouch. "Dirt from the hill behind my shop. Promised him I'd bring him some Texas soil one day. Didn't think it would be like this." Mercy, a woman with fiery red hair and a sharp smile, nodded. "He got my dad home in one piece. Dad talked about him every Sunday dinner until the day he died. This," she hefted her pouch, "is from our family farm in Ohio. It's for Elena too, and the kids." By the day of the funeral, there were 1,000 bikes. They didn't parade. They just gathered at the funeral home, a river of denim, leather, and quiet purpose. The local news was there, cameras buzzing, thinking this was just a sweet story about veterans honoring one of their own. They didn't know the half of it. The service was simple. A pastor spoke about service and sacrifice. Then David stood up. He walked to the plain wooden casket. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked at the casket. "Paul stood in the silence for 30 years, David said, his voice carrying in the hush. "He carried his family in here," he tapped his chest, "every single day. The law forgot. The world moved on, but we remember. We are his family now, and family doesn't forget." He opened his pouch and took out a handful of dark soil. He held it up high so everyone could see. Then, slowly, He let it trickle onto the lid of the casket. It made a soft, pattering sound. One by one, the bikers came forward. 1,000 people. They formed a line that stretched out the door and around the block. Each one stopped at the casket. Each one said a few quiet words. For Mark, brother. This is for Alina from Oregon. For little Jessica, I have a girl her age. And each one poured their dirt. Rich black soil from Iowa, red clay from Georgia, sandy earth from California, gray rocky dust from Maine. It wasn't just dirt. It was a promise. It was a witness statement. Every handful was a piece of the country saying, "We see you, we remember." The casket was soon covered in a thick, layered blanket of earth from all 50 states. It looked strange and powerful. The news cameras zoomed in, confused but fascinated. Then James and Mercy brought forward a large metal canister and a trowel. They carefully scooped all the mixed earth from the casket into the canister. They added water from a canteen. They began to mix it. Others stepped up to help. Soon, a dozen strong hands were stirring this thick, national mud. The pastor looked nervous. What are they doing?" he whispered to Lucy. "They're keeping a promise," Lucy said, tears streaming down her face. The mixture became a thick, cohesive clay. David stepped forward with the trowel again. He started to spread the clay over the seams and lid of the casket, sealing it shut. Others joined him, using their hands, smoothing the clay over the wood until the entire casket was encased in a hard, earthen shell. "The earth that watched over him now holds him close," David said, his voice final, "and holds our vow. The silence ends today." The crowd of bikers let out a sound then. It wasn't a cheer. It was a deep, unified breath, like a giant waking up. After the burial, they didn't leave. They filled the town's only big bar, the last stop. The air buzzed. It wasn't a sad wake. It was a war council. Lucy was there, handed a beer by a giant man called Tiny. David stood on a pool table. He didn't shout. The room just went quiet. "Victor Rojas," David said. The name hung in the air like poison. "He's old now. He's rich, he thinks he's safe. He's in Miami. He owns clubs, boats, thinks he's a businessman." David's lip curled. "We know the truth. The law may not have the pieces, but we do. Paul spent 30 years putting them together. He sent them to me bit by bit, letter by letter. He couldn't fight, so he gathered evidence. He waited." He held up a flash drive. "It's all here. Names, dates, bank routes. The cop who looked the other way, the driver, the shooter who died in a jail fight 10 years ago. But Rojas gave the order. Paul knew it. Now we know it." A man named Carlos from a Florida charter spoke up. "Miami is our territory. Rojas pays off local cops. He's connected." "We are not cops," James growled from the back. "We're not here to arrest him. We are here to remind him." "We are the network now," David said, looking at every face. "Paul's network. 1,000 eyes, 1,000 memories. We don't burn his empire down. We surround it. We squeeze it. We make sure every person who does business with him knows he is touched by this. We make him see us in his sleep. We are the dirt from every state, and we are in his walls." He laid out the plan. It was patient. It was clever. It used their empire, their connections. Truckers who were part of the network would refuse to haul goods for Rojas's businesses. Mechanics would find his fleet of cars constantly breaking down. The bikers who owned legitimate bars would spread the word. Any vendor who works with Rojas doesn't work with us. It was a quiet, nationwide chokehold. Lucy listened, her heart pounding. She saw two younger bikers, a man and a woman, talking intently in a corner. The man, Leo, was from Arizona. The woman, Stella, was from the California charter. They were looking at a map on a phone, their heads closed together. Leo pointed at something and Stella nodded, a fierce light in her eyes. Their fingers brushed on the table and they both looked up, a quick, charged moment passing between them before they looked back at the map. This was their mission now, and it was pulling people together in ways they never expected. Back in Miami, Victor Rojas first heard about it as a strange news story, a human interest piece. Veteran buried with honor by 1,000 bikers. He watched the clip on his large TV in his white, sterile penthouse. He saw the dirt, the strange sealing of the casket. A tiny chill, like a single drop of ice water, traced down his spine. He knew the name. Paul, a name from a lifetime ago, a messy problem he'd thought was buried. He muted the TV and called his assistant. Find out who organized that, he said. Biker groups, get me names. Meanwhile, the network began to move. James, the Texas mechanic, drove back home. The next day, a shiny truck pulled into his garage. The logo on the side was for Rojas Premium Seafood. The driver needed a brake job. James took a look. He shook his head. Sorry, partner, he said, wiping his hands on a rag. Can't help you, we're all booked up. The driver was confused. It's just brakes. You have 3 empty bays right there. Yep, James said, not smiling, and they'll stay empty for you. Take your business elsewhere. He leaned in, his voice dropping, and tell your boss that Texas dirt doesn't wash off. The driver left, sputtering. In Ohio, Mercy and her chapter visited local bars. They talked to the owners, friends of theirs. That new beer distributor, the one with the fancy Miami connection, we hear their stuff tastes like betrayal. No threats were made, just words. But within a week, 3 bars cancelled their contracts with the distributor. It was death by 1,000 cuts. Slow, quiet, maddening. Rojas's assistant came back with a list. Names like David, James, Mercy, and a note. They're not one club, they're dozens, different charters all across the country. They seem connected by this veteran, Paul. Rojas slammed his hand on his desk. This is nonsense. They are thugs on motorcycles. I have politicians in my pocket. But the reports kept coming. A shipment of linens for his hotels was accidentally rerouted to Alaska. A band booked for his nightclub suddenly cancelled, citing a scheduling conflict they wouldn't explain. He tried to fight back. He sent 2 of his own tough guys to lean on a trucking company in Georgia that had just refused a lucrative contract. The tough guys found the trucking yard empty except for 5 bikers from the Atlanta chapter who were just sitting there, drinking coffee and cleaning their guns. They didn't say a word. They just stared. The tough guys left. The chemistry between Leo and Stella, the 2 bikers from the bar, sparked into something more. They were both assigned to track Rojas's financial ties on the West Coast. They spent days together, following paper trails in library records and courthouse databases. It was boring, tedious work. They took a break in a quiet park. This isn't exactly the exciting revenge I pictured, Leo said, stretching. I thought there'd be more roaring engines. Stella smiled. This is better. This is how you really hurt a man like him. You don't punch him, you vanish his money. She looked at him. You're good at this, the research. He shrugged. I was an accounting major before. He didn't say before what. The club life had chosen him after his family lost their business to a loan shark. An accountant with a motorcycle, Stella said, her smile turning playful. That's a new one. He met her gaze. The air between them, always charged with a shared purpose, now hummed with something else. What about you? How does a California girl who looks like you get into this? Family business, she said, her smile fading a little. My dad was a charter president. I grew up in it. I wanted to be a lawyer, still might. This feels like using that for something right. She looked down, then back up at him. It's easier with a partner. He reached over and took her hand. His fingers were calloused from bike grips, hers was smooth. They just sat there for a moment, holding hands, not talking. It was a simple, YouTube-safe moment, but the tension and connection were as real as the mission they were on. They weren't just hunting for Rojas anymore, they were building something new in the ashes of Paul's old life. Back in Paul's town, Lucy became the heart of the communications hub. She used her home computer, set up an encrypted chat room David showed her. Messages flowed in from all over the country. Idaho here, the potato supplier for his restaurant chain, is now looking for a new client. Done. Maine, the lobster boat captain who supplied his Miami buffet quit, said he got a better offer from a co-op. Florida, Carlos, his favorite tailor, retired suddenly, the man who makes his suits, small thing but it's bothering him. Lucy would compile the reports and send them to David. It was working. Rojas was feeling the pressure. He was getting angry. Making mistakes. One night David called Lucy. He's trying to hire muscle. Outside guys, not local, he's scared. Should we be scared? Lucy asked, her voice small. No, David said, and she could hear the cold smile in his voice. Because we know about it. Carlos has a cousin who tends bar where these outside guys are drinking. We know their names, their rooms. They'll wake up tomorrow with flat tires and no clear memory of last night. This is our world, Lucy. He's playing in it now. The plan escalated. They didn't just disrupt, they exposed. Stella and Leo, working together perfectly now, found a shell company Rojas used to hide money. They didn't steal it. They anonymously sent the details to a very honest, very ambitious IRS agent. They also sent a copy to a newspaper reporter. The strike was financial, but it was also deeply personal. David arranged for a package to be delivered to Rojas's penthouse. No note. Inside the box was a single brick made of hardened, multicolored clay. It was a piece of the very earth that had sealed Paul's casket. A silent, terrifying message: we are everywhere, we are the land itself, and we remember. Rojas stared at the brick on his expensive desk. He finally understood. This wasn't an attack, it was a judgment, and it was coming from a jury of 1,000 people he could not buy or kill. For the first time in 30 years, Victor Rojas felt true, cold fear. He looked out at the Miami skyline, but all he could see was a vision of a quiet street, a house, and a mistake that had finally come home. He knew they wouldn't kill him. That would be too easy. They were going to bury him alive. In the silence, they were breaking. In the business empire, they were dismantling piece by piece. In the memory of a family he had erased, but who had just grown to 1,000 strong. Weeks turned into a month. The invisible war against Victor Rojas was like watching a giant machine rust. Nothing dramatic broke, but everything began to creak, stall, and fall apart. Rojas called an emergency meeting with his remaining loyal men in the back room of one of his failing nightclubs. The air smelled of stale smoke and desperation. "We need to hit back," a man named Silva shouted. "Find the leader, this David, and take him out." "Which one?" Rojas snapped, his voice brittle. "The David in Kentucky, or the one in Washington, or the one who runs a bike shop in Colorado? They all have the same name. They are not a single head to cut off. They are a swarm." He slammed his fist on the table. The IRS was auditing him. 2 of his businesses were shut down for sudden code violations. His wife was asking nervous questions about the money. Meanwhile, in a roadside diner in Nevada, Leo and Stella were having pancakes. Maps and printouts were spread between the syrup bottle and the salt shaker. Their knees touched under the table, a constant, warm point of contact. "I think we found the money trail for his property taxes," Stella said, tapping a line on a spreadsheet. "He's been using a charity for veterans as a front to funnel money and avoid taxes. The irony is disgusting." Leo looked at her, at the fierce concentration on her face. "You're amazing at this," he said, his voice soft. She glanced up, a blush coloring her cheeks. "It's just following the numbers." "It's not just that," he said. He reached across and took her hand, stopping her from tapping the paper. "It's you give this whole thing a heart. We're not just doing this for revenge. We're doing it for Paul's family. You remind me of that." Stella looked down at their joined hands. The charged moments between them had been building, a slow, steady current. Here, in the fluorescent light of the diner, it felt calm and real. "When this is over," she started. "Don't say it," Leo whispered. "Let's just focus on now, on finishing this for them." She nodded, squeezing his hand. "Okay." Their discovery was the final key. David, Lucy, and a few others gathered on a video call. Leo and Stella presented their findings. "It's all here," Stella said. "The fake charity, the wire transfers. It's enough for the feds to put him away for tax evasion, fraud, and money laundering. The old murder case, it might not stick, but this will bury him in a different kind of hole." David nodded slowly. "Good, we send it, not just to the IRS, to every news station in Miami, to the Attorney General. We shine the biggest, brightest light on him. Let the law he thinks he owns come for him, armed with our work." The package was sent. The network waited. The effect was immediate and public. It was not the quiet squeeze anymore. It was a tsunami. News vans surrounded Rojas's buildings. Federal agents walked into his offices with boxes. His picture was on the front page under the word "indicted." The bikers didn't celebrate, they watched. This was the final part of the ritual, the sealing of the casket. David organized one last ride. Not 1,000 bikes this time, just a small group of them, the ones who had been closest to the planning. They rode to Paul's grave. The fresh headstone was simple. It had his name, his dates, and the words, "Beloved husband of Elena, father of Mark and Jessica, remembered by all." David got off his bike. He carried a small, polished wooden box. The others gathered around. He opened it. Inside was the last of the national clay, the mix from the funeral, now fired into a hard, beautiful tile. "We promised him silence was over," David said, his voice rough. "We promised him his family would be remembered. Victor Rojas will live the rest of his life in a cage, knowing we did this. Knowing 1,000 strangers cared more about justice for Elena, Mark, and Jessica than he ever did about anything." He knelt and placed the clay tile at the base of the headstone. It fit perfectly. It was the final seal. They stood there for a long time in the quiet. The wind blew through the trees. It felt peaceful. Later, back in town, they had one last gathering at the last stop. The mood was different, lighter. The job was done. There were laughs, stories about the chaos they'd caused. James told a funny story about how he'd convinced a whole diner in Oklahoma to serve a Rojas-linked salesman the worst cup of coffee in history just by giving the waitress a look. Lucy stood with David. "What happens now?" she asked. "To all of you." David smiled, a real tired smile. "We go home, back to our charters, our lives, but the network stays. The phone lines stay open. We're connected now, Lucy, not by a club patch, but by this. You're part of it too." Across the room, Leo found Stella by the jukebox. The charged air between them had settled into something warm and sure. "My charter head said I could open a satellite garage in California," Leo said, trying to sound casual. "Said we need a good accountant out there who knows his way around an engine." Stella's eyes lit up. "California, huh? Yeah, if there was a reason to stay." She stepped closer, closing the last bit of distance between them. "I can think of a reason." She kissed him then, not a quick kiss, but a long, sweet, promising one. It was a beginning, forged in the middle of an ending. The empire of the bikers didn't change. They didn't give up their clubs or their ways, but they had added something new, a web of loyalty that stretched farther than any territory line. They had used their strength, not for money or power, but for a lonely old man and the family he lost. They had become his family. And as the bikes roared out of town the next morning, heading back to every corner of the country, they carried a new story with them. The story of Paul, of Elena, Mark, and Jessica. The story of the 1,000 handfuls of dirt. The story of how the quietest man finally got the loudest goodbye, and how that goodbye became the sound of justice, rolling like thunder across the land. Lucy watched them go from her porch. She looked at her garden, where David had sprinkled that first bit of soil. A single sunflower had sprouted there, tall and bright yellow, where none had been before. She smiled and went inside to check the encrypted chat. A message was blinking from Mercy in Ohio. "Just got home, the farm looks good. Thinking of planting a new tree for the kids. Let me know if you need anything, sister." Lucy typed back, her heart full. "The sunflower is growing here too." The celebration at the bar was warm, but for David, it felt incomplete. Legal papers were one thing, a man's soul was another. He waited a week, until the news reported that Victor Rojas, out on a massive bail, was a virtual prisoner in his penthouse, his assets frozen. Then David made one more ride. He went alone. He rode to Miami. He didn't go to the penthouse. He went to the cemetery. He had done his research. He found the plot where Rojas's mother was buried. He stood there for a long time, a solitary figure in leather under the Florida sun. He took out his phone and dialed a number Rojas's assistant had been given earlier that day. Rojas answered, his voice thin with stress. "Who is this?" "You know who this is," David said, his voice calm. "Look out your window to the northeast." A pause, then a shaky breath. "What do you want? Money? You've ruined me." "I don't want your money," David said. "I'm at Green Lawn Memorial, plot 1147. Your mother, Maria, she has a nice stone, a loving heart." David let the words hang. "Paul's wife, Elena, is buried in a pauper's field. His children share a marker paid for by the state. Their stones don't say loving heart. they just say their names, because the man who loved them was murdered too, just slower. "What are you saying?" Rojas whispered, true terror in his voice now. "I'm saying I'm holding a photograph," David said, though he held nothing. "A photograph of me here at your mother's grave, and a small bag of the same clay that sealed Paul's casket, the clay from 1,000 places, from the land that hates you." He paused, letting the image form. "The indictment will put you in a cell, but if you ever speak Paul's name or his family's name again with anything but the respect you use in a church. If you ever hire someone to dig into any of the 1,000 people who remember him, then everyone you have ever cared about, living or dead, will know we were here. They will know we can always get here. Your mother's memory will be touched by this dirt forever. Do you understand the silence I am telling you to keep now?" There was a long, strained silence on the other end. David could almost hear the old man crumbling. This was the true end, not the courtroom, but this phone call. It was the transfer of the 30-year silence from Paul onto the shoulders of the man who caused it. "I understand," Rojas finally gasped. "Good," David said. "Then our business is done." He hung up. He looked at the old woman's grave, not with malice, but with a grim finality. "I am sorry for your son," he said quietly. Then he turned and walked back to his bike. He never looked back. Meanwhile, the personal stories reached their own finishes. Lucy, back home, received a formal-looking envelope. Inside was a deed. It was for Paul's house. The title was clear, and in the owner field it read, "Lucy Miller in trust for the network." A note from David was paperclipped to it. "He'd want you to have it. Use it as a safe house for anyone who needs it. You're the keeper of the heart now." Tears filled her eyes. She walked through the quiet rooms, no longer seeing a museum of grief, but seeing a future. A place where a biker far from home could find a bed, where someone running from trouble could hide. Paul's silence had been broken, and his home would now be filled with the quiet hum of sanctuary. In California, Leo and Stella stood on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, the wind whipping their hair. Leo's bike and a moving van were packed. "You sure about this?" Stella asked, leaning into him. "The garage in Arizona is all set up." "Arizona doesn't have you," he said, pulling her close. "And it doesn't have this view. Your charter president offered me a job. Legit. Books for the auto shop and the bar, I can do that. And at night," he grinned, a real, easy smile she'd watched grow over the weeks, "I can learn to fix Harley from the best mechanic I know." She kissed him, a kiss that tasted of salt air and a limitless future. The charged tension was now a steady, warm current. Their mission had brought them together, but their choice to stay together was their own. It was a love built not just on attraction, but on shared purpose, respect, and the knowledge of what the other was capable of. Months later, the network's chat room was still active. It wasn't about Rojas anymore. It was a quiet pulse of a new family. James, Texas, got a rider coming through Kentucky with a busted clutch. "David, can you point him to a good wrench?" "David, Kentucky, sent him to Max. He's covered." "Mercy, Ohio, planting that tree for the kids this weekend. An apple tree, it'll bloom in the spring." "Lucy, Paul's town, the room is ready. Send him whenever. There's soup on the stove." The empire of the clubs went on. They still ran their routes, protected their territories, lived their loud and sometimes lawless lives. But woven through it now was this other, quieter thread, a thread spun from grief, woven with clay and dedicated to memory. They hadn't given up anything. They had gained something, a conscience, a nationwide heartbeat. On the first anniversary of Paul's funeral, no massive ride was organized. But at noon, in every time zone, 1,000 bikers, mechanics, lawyers, nurses, and a quiet woman named Lucy stepped outside. They didn't have to coordinate. They each held a small handful of local dirt. They stood for a minute in the sun, or the rain, or the wind. And then they let the earth fall from their hands, back to the ground from which it came. It was a silent salute, a reminder, a promise that never faded. Some bonds are forged in fire. Theirs was forged in earth and memory, and it was unbreakable. Thank you for riding with us on this emotional journey. Would you have answered the call for a lonely veteran? Let us know where you're listening from in the comments, and subscribe for more stories where loyalty is the only law that matters.